"You have no right to speak to my son," the wealthy mother snapped, her heels clacking sharply against the marble floor. But the black housekeeper didn't flinch. Just minutes earlier, the autistic boy, silent for 2 years, had whispered back to her in French a single word, a breakthrough no doctor had ever achieved. To the mother, she was just the help. What she didn't know was that this housekeeper held the key to unlocking her son's voice and turning their world upside down. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, in an instant, that something was off? Not dangerous, not chaotic, but wrong, in a way that scraped at your nerves like nails on glass. That's what happened the afternoon Annalise Carrington came home early. The polished marble floors of her $60 million zero-cents mansion in Sapphire Bay echoed beneath her designer heels. The house was quiet, as always, rolled, as usual, controlled, just the way she liked it. Annalise was 39, a titan in medical tech, known for creating life-saving devices, feared for her ruthless precision in business. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what she saw at the far end of the grand foyer. Her son, Milo, 7 years old, diagnosed with severe autism, sat cross-legged on the floor. That wasn't unusual, but sitting beside him, barely 2 feet away, was the cleaning lady, Selena Morales, wearing her blue apron, holding an illustrated book in Italian. And they were talking? While Selena was talking, Milo was looking at her with wide, focused eyes. His little hands ran across the pages, tracing the pictures. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't retreating into himself. He was calm. Annalise's voice shattered the moment, sharp, cold. "Excuse me," she said, her words slicing through the space. "Can someone tell me why the cleaning staff is speaking to my son?" Selena's head turned slowly. She stood up in one smooth motion, calm, collected. Her hands brushed the front of her apron as she responded, gently, "I was just—" "You were just— what?" Annalise took several steps forward, each one clicking louder than the last. "He doesn't talk to anyone, not his teachers, not his therapist, not even me. And now I find you here, whispering God knows what into his head." Her voice got quieter, but more dangerous. Selena didn't move. Her face stayed composed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cower. "I was just cleaning," she said carefully. "And he came over, sat beside me." Annalise's eyes flicked to the book still open on the floor. "Italian, illustrated vocabulary." Her brow furrowed. "Where did that come from?" "The library," Selena answered, her tone neutral. "I was reorganizing the shelves." "And you thought," Annalise hissed, "you could experiment on my son, fill his head with foreign gibberish like some kind of project?" Her hand waved dismissively. "Milo is not a child you can fix with words. He's severely autistic. 3 of the best pediatric neurologists in the country have said the same thing. He doesn't learn. He doesn't respond. You've known him for 3 months, and suddenly you think you know better?" Selena's eyes lowered just slightly, not in shame, but in sorrow. She had seen this before. That same helpless, angry denial from parents who couldn't bear to see beyond their grief. "With respect, Miss Carrington," she said, still calm, still quiet. "Sometimes children don't need to be fixed. Sometimes they just need to be heard, in a way that makes sense to them." A bitter laugh escaped Annalise. "You, a cleaning lady, are giving me parenting advice?" "It's not advice," Selena said, her eyes flicking down to Milo, who hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. He was still holding the book, still tracing his fingers along the page, his lips moving silently. "It's a possibility." And then, just as Annalise was about to unleash another icy wave, something happened. Milo looked up. His eyes locked onto Selena's. And in a voice so soft it barely rose above a whisper, he said, "Merci, ma." Time stopped. The air turned heavy. The sound of distant waves from the bay outside filled the silence where words should have been. Annalise's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. What did he say?" she finally asked, the disbelief cracking through her composure like a fault line. French, Selina answered. He said thank you, ma'am. But… He spoke? Annalise whispered, stepping back. Selina nodded but didn't smile. Her face was still, reverent almost. Children like Milo aren't broken, Miss Carrington. They just speak a different kind of language, one we haven't learned to listen to. Milo looked down at the book again, flipping to another page with renewed curiosity. And for the first time in 2 years, there was a light in his eyes. Not chaos, not confusion, but awareness, purpose. Annalise stood frozen. The woman she had never really seen had just unlocked something none of the country's top doctors had. And deep down, in a place she rarely allowed herself to go, she felt something shift. Not acceptance, not yet, but doubt. The kind that takes root quietly and changes everything later. Because in that cold marble hallway, a mother who believed money could buy every solution had just witnessed a miracle she couldn't explain. And as for Selina, she said nothing more. She said nothing more again, gently turning the page. But the silence that followed, that was the real turning point. The kind of silence that doesn't close a moment, but opens a door. What do you do when something challenges everything you've been told about your child, your control, your reality? That night, Annalise Carrington made her decision. The morning light had barely touched the edge of the glass ceiling in the atrium when Selina was summoned. The message came through the housekeeper, brief and formal. Mrs. Carrington would like a word, immediately. Selina put down the dish soap and dried her hands as she always did, calmly, efficiently. She walked past the gallery of framed awards and charity galas, past the untouched living room with museum-like precision, and entered the private office where Annalise ruled her world. It was a room of silence and glass, of power sharpened by precision. Annalise didn't look up right away. She sat behind her sleek mahogany desk, flipping through a report as if the person in front of her were not a person at all. Finally, she spoke. I need to be very clear with you, Selina, she said coldly. What happened yesterday was coincidental. Selina didn't speak. She stood with her hands folded in front of her, eyes forward, posture straight. Not defiant, but unshaken. My son, Annalise continued, is severely autistic. He has been evaluated by the best. He does not communicate. He does not comprehend languages, especially not foreign ones. What you heard yesterday, that was noise, a random imitation, nothing more. Still, Selina said nothing. Not because she agreed, but because she had seen this kind of resistance before. It wasn't about facts. It was about fear disguised as certainty. Annalise leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. From now on, I want you nowhere near him, no interaction, not a word. The housekeeper, Cecilia, will be responsible for all areas Milo frequents. You will focus on the basement, the guest wing, and the service quarters. I understand, ma'am, Selina said, her voice as even as glass. But Annalise wasn't finished. She wasn't trying to instruct, she was trying to punish. And for the record, she added, I hope you weren't under the illusion that what happened changes anything. Milo is not improving. He's not going to start talking. You don't have the qualifications to make those judgments. You're here to clean floors. That… Selina nodded slowly. Of course, Miss Carrington, just cleaning. But inside her mind burned, not from anger, but from recognition. She had seen this before, in parent after parent, blinded by pride or fear. She knew that look in Milo's eyes. She knew what those murmured words meant. This wasn't regression, it was awakening. That afternoon, while sorting supplies in the basement, Selina heard footsteps. Not heavy ones like Annalise's. These were cautious, thoughtful. When she turned, Dr. Nathan Liu, the family's private pediatrician, was coming down the narrow staircase. Sorry to interrupt, he said gently, glancing back to be sure no one followed. I need to talk to you. About Milo. Selina set down the box she was holding. Is something wrong? Actually, he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. It's the opposite. Yesterday, When I heard him speak, it was the first spontaneous verbal communication he's made in 2 years. No prompts, no pressure, just natural response. Chelina's heart quickened, but her face remained calm. What do you think it means? Dr. Liu hesitated. Do you have experience with special education? She paused. Telling him the truth could open everything or destroy everything. Dr. Liu, she began, if I told you I have a PhD in applied linguistics and that I spent 5 years specializing in multilingual development in neurodivergent children, what would you do with that information? The silence that followed was full of possibility. You have a PhD? He asked, blinking slowly. University of Melbourne, she replied. 17 academic publications. My thesis was on language emergence in selectively mute children. He sat down on a nearby box, stunned. Why are you cleaning floors? My mother fell ill. I lost my position, needed money fast to cover her treatment. This job came up. I took it. Dr. Liu shook his head in disbelief. And Milo? I don't think I can help him, she said. I know I can. He's not profoundly autistic, as you've been told. He shows traits, yes, but primarily he suffers from selective mutism, triggered by high emotional stress and auditory sensitivity. He shut down because no one speaks his language. Literally. Dr. Liu stared at her. How do you know that? 43 children, she said, over the past 5 years. Diagnosed as hopeless, 38 now attend mainstream schools. Most speak at least 2 languages, some 5. There was a long pause. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and handed her a card. My private number, he said. If you're willing to help Milo, I'll support you. Medically, but it has to stay off the record, for now. Selina nodded. No smile, no triumph, just purpose. That night, while Annalise dined with business partners at the yacht club, Selina sat in the small staff lounge and did something she hadn't done in nearly 2 years. She picked up the old landline phone and dialed a number she still remembered by heart. Professor Holden, she said when the voice answered. A long pause, then, Sila Morales? My God, where have you been? Your work's been cited in 3 major journals this year. Harvard's been trying to reach you. I'm in a complicated place, she said quietly, but I need your help. I need access to my old intervention files, especially for selective mutism. I'll send everything, he said without hesitation. And when she hung up, for the first time in months, Selina felt something stir inside her. Not hope, but readiness. A plan was forming, quiet, focused, intentional. But what she didn't know was that Cecilia had heard her, and by morning Annalise would too, because when someone fights to silence you, it's not always because they don't believe you. Sometimes it's because deep down they do. You know the feeling when someone's watching you? Not with admiration or concern, but calculation, when every word you speak might be carried somewhere it doesn't belong? Selina Morales had that feeling the next morning. She'd just finished restocking the linen cabinet when Cecilia, the housekeeper, brushed past her a little too quickly, her eyes a little too curious, her lips too tight. Selina noticed but said nothing. She didn't need confirmation. Her instincts told her exactly what had happened. Still, when the call came, Miss Carrington wants to see you, now. She didn't flinch. She walked up the stairs with the same even stride, past the polished photos, past the walls that never listened, into the office where power sat behind a desk and pretended it had all the answers. Annalise Carrington was already standing. She didn't gesture for Selina to sit. She didn't offer a word of greeting. On her desk, her laptop was open. Turned to face forward, the page on the screen was unmistakable. Dr. Selina Morales, University of Melbourne. Publications, awards, honors, it was all there, the past laid out like a confession. You lied to me, Annalisa said, not loud, but sharp, final. Selina remained standing, hands folded. I never lied, she said. I just didn't offer information you never asked for. Don't play semantics with me, Annalise snapped. You let me think you were just a cleaning lady. All this time you've been using your position to get close to my son. Selina tilted her head slightly. Would you have believed me if I told you who I was? Annelise's eyes narrowed. That's not the point. The point is, she took a breath, struggling to stay composed. You manipulated your way into this house, into Milo's life. Selina's voice remained calm, but firmer now. You made it very clear from day one that people like me were meant to be invisible, that our ideas, our words didn't matter. Annelise flinched, just slightly, but she held her ground. I trusted you to stay in your lane, she said, her voice icy. I trusted you not to interfere. And I trusted you, Selina said, her voice rising for the first time, to see your son. That silence, the one that hangs like smoke after a fire. That's what filled the room next. Neither of them spoke. Until the door burst open. Mama, Selina! It was Milo. Annelise turned, startled. Dr. Nathan Liu stood behind him, calm but purposeful. Milo ran straight to Selina, held her hand, then with perfect clarity he said, Je comprends les chansons. French. He turned to Annelise. Puedes enseñarme más palabras. Spanish. He looked at Dr. Liu. Ich kann sagen? Eins, zwei, drei. German. The room fell still. Annelise's hand trembled ever so slightly. Her son, her silent, unreachable child, was speaking fluently, across 3 languages, unprompted. Dr. Liu stepped forward. He placed a tablet on the desk. Miss Carrington, he said gently, you need to see this. The videos began to play. Milo counting in Japanese. Milo singing a simple song in Arabic. Milo recognizing Mandarin characters with childlike joy. In 3 weeks, Dr. Liu said, your son has demonstrated an advanced understanding of 7 languages. Not memorization, comprehension. He's processing grammar, syntax, even tone. Annalisa couldn't take her eyes off the screen, or her son. But the doctors said, she whispered. They were wrong, Selina said, simply. He's not broken, Dr. Liu added. He was shut down, emotionally isolated. His condition isn't what they diagnosed. It's selective mutism, combined with hypersensitivity and unrecognized intelligence. Milo turned to his mother. For the first time in 2 years, his eyes held hers, unflinching, open. Mama, he said, switching to English. Cellina says I'm not broken, I'm just different. Then, in Italian, mi ha insegnato a parlare perché volevo, non perché dovo. Annelise fell to her knees. Not from grief, from truth. She looked at Selina, the woman she had ignored, dismissed, ordered to silence, and for once she had none of the right words. I didn't know, she murmured. I know, Selina said gently, but now you do. Another silence. This one was different. It wasn't denial, it wasn't defiance, it was realization. And what follows realization is choice. What will Annelise do with the truth? You know that moment when the noise in your head finally stops? Not because someone silenced it, but because something louder took its place. The sound of truth. That's what happened to Annelise Carrington, right there on the office floor, looking up at her son. The boy she had wrapped in a cocoon of fear, misdiagnosis, and loneliness. And realizing he had been awake this whole time. She didn't speak right away. She couldn't. Milo was still standing between her and Selina, calm, hands playing with the hem of his shirt, eyes bright. Not the confused flicker she remembered, but clear, purposeful focus. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't hiding. He was present. Milo, she whispered, her voice cracking at the edges. You could always talk. He nodded slowly. Yes, Mama. His English was soft but steady. But you looked sad when I tried, so I stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. Dr. Liu placed a hand on her shoulder, gently, grounding her. Selective mutism doesn't mean they can't speak. It means in certain environments they won't, out of fear, out of confusion, out of trauma. Selina knelt beside Milo. He just needed to feel safe, she said quietly, and seen. Annelise looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time without titles, without walls. She saw a woman who had been ignored, who had accepted her silence like armor, but who had never stopped listening. And somehow that made it worse, because the answer had been standing in her own house, wearing an apron. "I need to apologize," Annalise said. Her voice was low, fragile, unfamiliar. "Do you? And I need to ask you to stay, not as a housekeeper, as Milo's teacher, as the person who gave me back my son." Selina didn't smile. She placed her hand gently on Milo's shoulder and said, "I'll stay, but only on one condition." Annalise looked up, searching. "Milo is not a miracle," Selina said. "He's not a success story. He's a child. A brilliant one, yes, but his value isn't in the languages he speaks or the milestones he crosses. He deserves to be loved for who he is, not for what he can do." Annalise nodded. Slowly, the truth didn't need to be shouted. It was already rearranging everything inside her. And as if sensing the shift in the room, Milo walked over and reached for both their hands. He held them, his mother's on one side, Selina's on the other, and said softly in Portuguese, "Mamãe, Selina, are we a real family now?" The silence that followed wasn't the silence of discomfort. It was the silence that comes after the storm, when the air is cleaner and you finally breathe fully for the first time. Annalise looked at her son, then at the woman who had taught him how to speak, and taught her how to listen. "Yes," she said, choking back tears. "Yes, we are. But healing is not a final scene. It's a beginning. There's something sacred about the first morning after everything changes, not because the world looks different, but because you do." That was the morning the Carrington mansion, once silent and controlled, began to hum with something unfamiliar. Life. Annalise stood by the French windows, sipping coffee she hadn't made herself in years, watching Milo from across the lawn. He was tracing words on a chalkboard Selina had set up near the garden, sounding them out softly in German. His posture was upright, focused. There was light in his eyes. Selina sat beside him, offering gentle prompts when needed, but mostly listening. That was what still amazed Annalise, the listening. Selina taught without intrusion. She didn't demand progress, she invited it. Inside the house there had already been changes. The locked glass doors of the library were now open. The shelves, once pristine and untouched, were filled with colorful flashcards, vocabulary books in 6 languages, auditory tools and soft learning games, Milo's drawings, stick figures, scribbled alphabets, flags of countries, decorated one side of the wall. No longer hidden, no longer silenced. Annalise had begun attending every session, at first from the corner of the room, then closer. Not to supervise, but to learn, and what she learned wasn't just about her son. It was about herself. One afternoon, as Milo counted in Mandarin, she turned to Selina and said quietly, "Why didn't I see this sooner?" Selina answered without blame, "Because most people don't look for what they're not told to expect." It wasn't a judgment, it was a truth. Word of Milo's transformation began to spread quietly. Friends noticed the change. Therapists asked questions. The family's speech specialist requested to observe a session. Selina always agreed, on one condition, that Milo wasn't to be evaluated as a patient, but understood as a child. But not everyone welcomed the change. Cecilia, the housekeeper who had once reported Selina, became colder by the day. She whispered to other staff, casting doubt. She rolled her eyes when Milo sang, claimed Selina was playing some emotional game. One evening, Annalise overheard her, and that was the final straw. The next morning, Cecilia's contract was terminated. Respect wasn't optional anymore, not in a home that had nearly lost everything to silence. That evening, as Selina reorganized materials in the study, Annalise approached her with a small envelope. "What's this?" Selina asked. "A letter," Annalise said. "From Stanford. They're requesting a review of your thesis and offering a lecture position. They've been trying to find you for a year." Selina stared at it, not out of surprise, but out of hesitation. "I'm not done here," she said. And I'm not asking you to leave, Annalise replied, but I am asking you to let the world see what I almost didn't. Milo appeared in the doorway, smiling. Selina, he said in Spanish, can we do more colors today? Of course, she replied in the same language, leading him back to the desk. And as the two sat down, Annalise stood quietly by the door and realized this wasn't just the beginning of a child's education, it was the rebirth of a family. But new beginnings, especially the beautiful ones, don't go unnoticed for long. Hope has a way of spilling beyond its original borders. What starts in a quiet room between a teacher and a child can ripple outward, until it reaches those who never knew they needed it. That's exactly what happened in the months that followed Milo's awakening. It started with a simple idea. Selina recording one of their sessions, not for fame, not for validation, a clip of Milo naming animals in 6 different languages, pointing, laughing, gently correcting Selina when she mispronounced the Swedish word for cat. The video was posted under a modest YouTube channel called Learning with Milo. Within a week, it had over 200,000 views. By the end of the month, that number had climbed to 1 million. Parents from every corner of the world began leaving comments, some in English, some in Portuguese, Spanish, French, sharing stories of children who had been labeled, silenced, misunderstood. They called Milo a miracle, a symbol, a lighthouse. But Selina responded to every message with the same clarity. Milo is not a miracle. He is a child whose language was finally heard. Annalise watched the momentum with disbelief that turned into purpose. She established the Milo and Selina Foundation, aimed at supporting neurodivergent children through multilingual education and cognitive emotional support. At first it was 1 school, then 5, then 15. The program wasn't about fast results, it was about deep understanding, and people responded. Meanwhile, offers began pouring in for Selina. Lecture series, book deals, university appointments. She turned down most of them at first, insisting she wasn't ready to walk away from Milo's journey. But when Harvard, Stanford, and the University of Melbourne entered a bidding war to bring her onto faculty, Annalise sat her down and said, "You don't have to stop teaching Milo to start teaching the world." Selina agreed. On her own terms, she would write the book, she would present the research, but she would stay rooted in the work that began it all. The book was titled The Language of the Heart: How Multilingualism Transformed Special Children. It became a bestseller before it even launched. And as for Milo, he blossomed. He no longer whispered, he told stories, corrected grammar, invented games where every object had to be named in at least 3 languages. He laughed louder, he cried more freely, he asked questions that stunned professional linguists. One crisp afternoon he ran onto the porch with a beaming smile. "Mama," he called out, "I learned a new word in Swedish today. Kärlek. It means love." Annalise's heart swelled. "That's beautiful, my love," she said, reaching for him. "And where's Monsieur Lupin?" she asked. Milo's eyes sparkled. "She's filming another lesson. Today we have a lot of new students," he added, switching to Spanish mid-sentence. Hoy tenemos muchos estudiantes nuevos. The pride in his voice was so natural, so full of life, it made Annalise pause. Inside, Selima was organizing materials for the next video when Dr. Nathan Liu arrived with a sealed envelope in his hands and a grin on his face. "Ladies," he said, placing the envelope on the table, "Nature Neuroscience just accepted your article, and the American Pediatric Association wants you to keynote the national conference." Selina stared at the letter, then at Annalise, who smiled without hesitation. "Dr. Santos," she said, now always using her title with quiet pride, "you've done more than prove them wrong. You've redefined what right looks like." Selina nodded, then looked out the window to where Milo was counting butterflies with the gardener in German. But for every rise there's a shadow. Because not everyone was thrilled. Cecilia, the former housekeeper, had tried to tarnish Jalina's name on social media after her termination. Her posts were bitter, laced with resentment, but they didn't have the impact she expected. In fact, it backfired. High society families didn't want an employee who publicly attacked their employers. One by one, doors closed. When Annalise heard, she simply said, "Karma has its own schedule," and as Milo's laughter echoed through the halls, once silent, once cold, it became clear that this home was no longer just a place of wealth, but a space of growth. But the real test was yet to come. Every journey has a moment when it steps outside the personal and becomes something greater. For Milo, for Selina, and for Annalise, that moment came 2 years later beneath the stage lights of the International Special Education Conference, in front of more than 5,000 educators, doctors, researchers, and parents from across the globe. The room was massive, the kind that swallows small voices, but Milo wasn't afraid. He stood beside Selina, who wore a soft beige blazer, elegant, composed, purposeful. Her presence, once ignored in a silent mansion, now commanded attention from leaders in science and education. Annalise watched from the front row, her hands clasped, heart steady. The lights dimmed. The host took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "please welcome Dr. Selene Morales and her student, Milo Carrington." Applause thundered. Milo walked to the center of the stage and took a breath. His hands were steady. He didn't clutch his cue card. He didn't need to. "My name is Milo Carrington," he began, his voice ringing clear through the auditorium. "And 2 years ago, doctors said I might never speak normally." A ripple moved through the audience. He paused, then smiled slightly. "Today I speak 9 languages," he said, "because a woman believed I had a voice from the beginning. She didn't try to fix me. She just taught me how to use what I already had." And then he switched to Spanish. "Gracias por escucharme." Then to Arabic. "Shkran nek mashmitme." Then to French. "Merci de m'avoir écouté." The crowd rose to their feet, a wave of applause swelling into a standing ovation. Annalise wiped her eyes, not out of sorrow, but gratitude. Selina stepped up to the microphone. "A year ago," she said, "I was invisible in this society. Today I am here not because I've changed, but because someone finally decided to see me. The same way we must see children, not as limitations, not as labels, but as infinite potential." She paused, scanning the crowd, her gaze soft but firm. "Every child has a language. Some speak with numbers, some with pictures, some with silence. Our job is not to force them into our world, it's to learn theirs." The crowd fell silent, hanging on to every word. After the lecture, a reporter approached her backstage. "Dr. Morales," she asked, "when did you know Milo was special?" Selina looked over at Milo, who was showing a new friend how to count in Japanese using his fingers and butterfly clips. She smiled. "The first day he looked me in the eye," she said. "All children are special. Some just need a different language to show their magic." Today, the Milo and Selina Foundation has helped over 10,000 children across the country. They provide tailored, multilingual programs for children on the spectrum. They train teachers, support parents, and fund education in underserved areas. Annalise Carrington, once the embodiment of high walls and cold logic, has become a passionate advocate for inclusive education, using her fortune not just to build companies, but to build futures. And Selina Morales, once invisible, is now a global voice in education and neurodiversity, reminding the world that true intelligence isn't measured in test scores, but in connection. Milo? He's just getting started. He's already working on his 10th language, but more importantly, he's happy. He laughs, he plays, he teaches, and every now and then he still asks Kelina, "How many more kids do you think we can help?" She always answers the same way, "As many as we can reach," because sometimes the most powerful revolution doesn't start in labs or courtrooms, but in a child's whisper, in a mother's surrender, and in the hands of someone the world never saw coming. And if this story reached you, really reached you, then maybe it's time to ask, who around you is still waiting to be seen? Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.